The beauty of this particular form of recording your discoveries and having it there on the page in front of you is then you can take some of your key observation areas that you have worked on as you have gone through the text of Scripture over and over again. You can highlight, indicate various observations you've made of key words, key repeated words, or figures of speech, or connectives, and so you can do that like this. If you think of the different or we can we can mark them, and what I've done is I've chosen purple to go through so that the connectives will really stand out. And as you look at the screen, you'll see them coming up there, so that he is able to preach, especially the circumcision party. Rebuke them sharply, so that they will be sound in faith. Observing connectives is really one of those key observations that will help us understand and will unlock the text for us. Teach what is good, so that you can encourage young women. And another observation that is really important is the theme of doctrine or truth. One of the problems we see, the key problem in the churches in Crete, was that the false teachers were coming in, and they were teaching a form of Jewish legalism, and that false teaching was evidenced by a corrupt and a wrong lifestyle. And so the exhortation is, Titus, we need to have sound teaching. This is one of those themes that you've identified. And so you'll see there in the orange words that are significant towards this particular concerning this theme. I've highlighted in orange. The second paragraph there, so that he's able to teach sound doctrine. Rebuke them sharply in the next paragraph, so that they will be sound in the faith. Chapter 2, verse 1, the paragraph there, older men should be sound in the faith. Older women should teach what is good. And paragraph 2.6, your teaching should be sound in speech. 2.9, so that they may be an ornament to the doctrine of God. And so you can see how what this does is it causes these key words to be highlighted. Another one, of course, is the area of character. The point of sound teaching is that it results in godly character. And so I've chosen to highlight that too. You'll see it's in blue, 1:1. It's in accordance with godliness. The next paragraph, someone who is blameless. Again, the focus on the elders, the bishops that are to be appointed, should be part of the answer, not part of the problem. Paragraph 1:10, these false teachers, they're unfit, we read, for any good work. Paragraph 2:6, they should show yourself a model of good works. And the slaves should show fidelity, in other words, good character. And so, as we look at the chart, you'll notice how the observations inside the box, they are from the text, mostly in order, unless it serves us to do it differently. The key observation, or sorry, some of the key repeated words, key words, connectives have been highlighted. It could be done through colour, it could be done through a different font, it could be done in all sorts of ways. But the point is, what you have is a chart that is very visual and easy to see. And when you come back to this in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 4 years, it will be very easy for you to pick up the things you've learned and discovered, because they are right there in front of you. And so now we come to talk about the outside. And on the outside, this is where we record those things that we have, the further observations. And you'll notice, for the sake of colour, that they're in green. My observations are in green. And then those things that we've seen, that we've interpreted. The outside is where we can record these. And I've used the colour blue. And one of the things that we would ask you is that there is a colour code, whatever you choose it to be, with regard to observation and interpretation. And one of the main reasons for this is we, as staff, when we're working with you, when we're grading your work, we want to be able to see easily what it is you're doing. Are you observing or are you interpreting? This will help us to coach you in these different skills, but also it helps you to think, okay, what is this? Am I observing or am I interpreting? And so you'll notice that the particular method that I've used here is I have a verse reference, because that is what this comment is connected to. You can use arrows, you can use codes, you can do it all sorts of ways, but one of the easiest ways is simply to have a verse reference number. And then the issue you're addressing, the observation. And so what I have here is in 1:1, it says it's the Apostle Paul. And so the observation question, of course, is the who question. And the answer is Paul. And the note I've made is that in the context of false teachers, Paul emphasizes that he is both a servant and an apostle. And as such, he has authority in the matters of doctrine. The reason this was important to me is that Paul talks about him as a servant, and that is his heart to serve the saints and to serve the people. But what he's doing in this letter is addressing a whole group of people that are teaching false doctrine. And as such, he wants to make the statement that he is speaking as an apostle. He has the authority as one ordained by God with the apostolic anointing. And that apostolic anointing gives him authority in matters of doctrine. So why does he begin this way? And so therefore I've got that in blue, because this is an interpretation. Why does he begin the way he has begun? With this statement about truth that is in accordance with godliness. And my thoughts there are that right from the very beginning of this letter, Paul addresses both the problem and the solution. And the solution is that the truth, the doctrine, is in keeping with godliness. As we've seen in this letter, the false teachers, the circumcision party, they had a doctrine and they were preaching that, but the result was a decadent lifestyle. And the apostle is emphasizing that actually truth results in godliness. It results in quality character. We could say it as I've put there. Right belief system is in keeping with right lifestyle. The two work together. In chapter 1 verse 5 and in verse 7, I put a note that two words are used here to describe the leaders that had to be appointed. One word is the elder and the other a bishop. And in contemporary church life, we know that these two are seen as different offices. A bishop is a very formal thing, often with gowns and formality, but from this we see that they were simply two words describing the same office. You can see I've made a note of that even though today they're different, they were not back then. I've got a note now of chapter 1, 6 to 9, and this here is a list of the qualifications of the elder. And the point I'm noting is how they are in contrast to the description of the false teachers. In other words, this isn't some arbitrary manual on church leadership that's been written, but rather the Apostle Paul, even in the qualities that the elders should have, even those are mentioned, are directly opposite to the qualities of the leaders and the false teachers. And so the new elders, simply put, they need to be part of the answer and not part of the problem. Now, another way that these charts can be used that is so useful is different studies or observations can be made. And what I have done is at the bottom of the chart is I have a list of the qualifications of the elder that we have in 5 through 9. They're all typed there, and then I compare that to the qualities of the false teachers, the rebellious people, idle talkers, deceivers, circumcision party, etc., etc. And in observing that, I then come to a conclusion and an interpretation. And what I've put there is there's a direct contrast between the characteristics required of the elders Titus was to appoint and the false teachers. This contrast is in both character, lifestyle, and the need to know and teach sound doctrine. So again, emphasizing these two things. The problem with the false teachers was that they were holding to a false doctrine which, although seemed good, as it was based among other things on Jewish law, and we know the law is good, so even though it seemed good, it actually resulted in a lifestyle of ungodliness. In other words, the wrong teaching led to the wrong lifestyle. And so at the bottom of my chart, I've listed these things out because it becomes very clear so often to see things in list form. And so 1:7, asking the what question. And the note I've recorded there, my interpretation, is the church leader is a steward of that which is another's. The emphasis on the word steward. Paul's focus for leaders here is character first, then ability to teach, which was needed on the island of Crete. And as you look at this particular list in chapter 1, 5 following, you'll notice that particular order. Firstly, these leaders had to be of a certain character. Secondly, they had to have a certain ability. And it was the ability that followed the character. It wasn't the character that came first. In 1:10, there's a real emphasis. And the emphasis is especially the circumcision. This means, of course, that the main problem was Jewish legalism that was being taught. And you've listened to the teaching on the circumcision party. And as we move on to Galatians, we're going to see this problem again. I've made a note there as an interpretation after observing the emphasis in verse 10. Through the studies, the quote there, that the Cretans are always liars, vicious brutes, and lazy gluttons. This quote is from Epimenides, And I found that from an author, Keener. And so I want you to notice how I've noted that it's a quote from Epimenides, and I've also put the place where I discovered that information from. It's very important that we put sources and identify our sources. But there's another note too. The paradox of the legalistic teaching is that it did not lead to godly lifestyle. The gospel should have come in and changed the society, transformed the society. But sadly, it was just simply affirming the decadence and the poor character qualities of the people in Crete. I've observed the figure of speech. To the pure, all things are pure. And I've identified that as an idiom. And then I have an interpretation. This is probably talking about Jewish kosher food, the Jewish kosher food laws. And a contrast, as I've reflected in Matthew 15, when Jesus is speaking to the Pharisees. He said it is out of the heart that comes evil. And there's a list of the evil things that come out of the heart. And I've made a note of that too. To the pure, all things are pure. But to the corrupt and unbelieving, nothing is pure. Their very minds and consciences are corrupted. And so, an interpretation of the figure of speech. Chapter 2, verse 1 to 10. What is going on there? Paul encourages Titus to teach the different groups in the church that sound doctrine is consistent with godly lifestyle. And so he's really practical here. He begins with the exhortation that Titus should teach that what is consistent with sound doctrine, and then he works his way through the different groups. And as you look at your chart, you can see very clearly older men, older women, the younger women, yourself, the younger men, and the slaves. It's all very visual. Chapter 2, 3 to 6. There's a comparison there. The negative behavior is addressed here is similar to the behavior of the false teachers mentioned in chapter 1, 10 to 16. As you look at the negative behavior of the older women and the younger women and the younger men and the slaves. In other words, they were exhibiting the same kind of behavior as the false teachers. And this, of course, is what we would expect, because the false teachers were a model of what it was they were teaching practically. And so the issues being addressed in the congregation were very similar to that of the false teachers. Chapter 2, verse 7, the observation question being answered is to who? And that is Titus. And we notice that Titus is addressed along with the young men. And so very probably that's because he too was a young man as Paul was addressing him, even as Timothy was, as part of Paul's apostolic team. Chapter 2, verse 10. Paul is speaking here that one's lifestyle is a commentary on one's doctrine. The slaves, you'll notice, are told that they should live a certain way, a godly way, so that in everything they may be an ornament to the doctrine of God. And so I put a little note here that our lifestyle is indeed a commentary on our doctrine. What we believe, our understanding of truth, our values, that will be lived out in our lives. Now, due to lack of space, I've put this little note here. You'll notice chapter 1 verse 10, we know what portion it relates to, and just for the sake of this video, this particular chart is in two parts, when of course normally it would all be on one page. I wanted to answer the who question, a very important who question in chapter 1 verse 10, and it's about the circumcision group, and a little interpretation there. The circumcision was a group of people who believed that for a Gentile to be saved they needed to convert to Judaism first. This is connected to the teaching that you've heard. And that is that this included males being circumcised and everyone keeping the kosher food laws and the rest of the laws of Moses. And so that's an interpretation there of the who from chapter 1 verse 10. And so we come to the segment summary. And this is a really important opportunity. You just to sit back and think, okay, what is this what is the message? What is being said here in this segment? And you'll notice the summary I have there. The problem of false teachers and teaching had infiltrated the churches in Crete, and Titus had been left behind on the island by Paul to sort out this problem. He is commissioned to appoint elders who can teach correctly, rebuke the false teachers so they would change their teaching and bring right teaching, and also bring right teaching to the various groups in the church. And so that is my summary of what's being said. And as you wrestle with these different segments, as you reflect on what's happening in them, what's being said, this is a great way just to consolidate your thoughts for that particular segment. And then application. We would ask you that on every vertical chart you have at least one application or timeless truth. The difference in the terminology we use in the SBS is the application may be more personal, or a timeless truth may be an application which is more general, which is a truth that is true for all time. As I've reflected on this, I have an application here. As a leader, I see the challenge that character is as important as ability. The two go hand in hand. If not, then it is possible to have the right words to profess to know God but deny Him with our actions. There's no distinction between my so-called public life and private life. What happens in the home, with marriage, family, handling money, etc. is just as important as the more public life. And I'm particularly reflecting on the qualities of the elder in 1:5 through 9. How Paul speaks about the family life, and not greedy for gain, and hospitable, and all these different qualities. They're all important. And that is my reflection by way of application, and a real challenge to me as a leader. We would ask too that you put a small key somewhere on your chart, just so that our staff are able to know what it is you've done. Of course, if these charts were simply for yourself, they wouldn't be necessary, but we do have to help you. We want to help you. We want to help you in the skills of observation, interpretation, application. And we, of course, as part of the University of the Nations, we are grading this, and therefore it's important we know what it is that you've done. So please would you put a small key somewhere so we know what observation is, and here it's green on mine, interpretation is darker blue, and the application timeless truth is the lighter blue colour. It's also helpful too to have a reference of the version of the Bible that you've used, and here I've used the New Revised Standard Version. So there we are. That's a picture of the work that we've done together. You see it there laid out as one particular chart, and as you go through, everything is very easy to see, very easy to recall and to be reminded of.